In this video, we're going to be going over the M551A1. First off, I kind of wanted to just speak about this vehicle real quick. I am personally not a huge fan of the vehicle. The biggest thing for me is the impact that this vehicle has, and it doesn't feel like it has as much impact as other attackers in this game, and I've just been kind of trying to think about what can kind of be done about that in this situation, and hopefully in the future, whenever like an M551A1 goes into battle, it also gets matched up against another M551A1. Because I think one of the things that I've noticed is because attackers get paired up against attackers, there'll be situations where like the enemy will have an ALVT, which is far superior in just performance-wise compared to the M551A1. And it feels like you can have a less performative game just based off of the opposition that the enemy team gets. And there's other vehicles in the game that are kind of similar to that, kind of like the Leo 1A6 and the Martyr being paired against each other. Generally just because the Martyr is a lot more useful and has a lot more utility in a given battle than like the Leo 1A6. So I don't think this vehicle is super terrible. Well, I'm not a huge fan of it, right? Its damage is alright. I feel like it should have a little bit of a shorter reload. There's a few things that I feel could be a bit better on this vehicle. One thing is its speed. I just wish this vehicle felt more speedy, kind of like the HSTVL. In a sense, the M551A1 has a very similar movement speed to something like the T62 or the Object 287, and in that sense, it doesn't feel like it's a fast mobile vehicle when it has similar performance in terms of top speed and everything compared to those vehicles, unlike the HSTVL, which is extremely fast and extremely nippy. But let's go ahead and get into the abilities of the vehicle. So the ultimate is Lights Out. It's an EMP drone that kind of comes down, and you got about a 10-second windup before it explodes. You throw it at enemies and it does about 1100 damage to those enemies. It also slows them, and it also has the jamming kind of like status effect where it prevents people from using abilities and prevents them from healing up and stuff like that. So that's kind of that. The passive on this vehicle is while you are boosting, you will go ahead and reload a little bit faster. So when you're stock on this vehicle, you have a 4-second reload, and then when boosting it's 3.2 seconds. You'll also have kind of like increased drifting performance, so you drift more than you actually just like handbrake. And also you take less fall damage when you're yeeting yourself off cliffs and stuff, which can kind of give you the option to survive some pretty rough falls. But there's nothing super important about the passive. Like, one thing with the boosting that I've noticed is just because you can boost doesn't mean it's always going to signify like an increased in performance in a firefight or something like that. So I like it, but I wish it was like a 5 seconds after boosting you get that reload cooldown, and not just you're either boosting and you get it or you're not. You know what I mean? For the first ability, it's the Canister Volley. I'm not a huge fan of this ability, just in the sense that I feel like its performance isn't that great all the time, especially stock. Stock performance is a lot worse compared to any of the upgrades. So after you get some upgrades on it, I do think the Canister is a little bit better, but I'm still not a huge fan on the damage output of the Canister. I feel like maybe increasing the Canister round so it feels a bit more impactful would be a nice touch, but otherwise not a huge fan of it. And then there's the manual emergency APS. So it allows you to generally block 1 to 2 shots depending on the enemy vehicle. If it's an autocannon, it'll block a lot more damage just because it'll block more shots. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with this ability. It's in an okay spot, but I also don't know if it's like the best ability for this vehicle. But I also don't know what you would swap it out with, in all honesty. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the modules that I run on this vehicle. So, for the first ability module slot, this is all about the APS. I've kind of just experimented with a bunch of them, and One of the ones that I prefer running is the manual emergency APS, which creates a 10-meter smoke area around the vehicle's location, and any enemies that come into that smoke do get slowed. I think this is a pretty neat one. It does decrease the energy cost, but it does also increase the cooldown. There's some also decent alternatives. You have the 25% to frontal ramming resistance, and it increases the MEEP's hit points. So just the APS hit points. It does increase the actual cost as well by a little bit, but I don't think it's that bad of a trade-off. It also increases your ramming resistance frontally when you have this actual module installed. And then for the legendary, killing an enemy grants a free ability reactivation for 4 seconds. Reactivation restores the APS, hit points, and duration. My biggest issue with this is, again, there's some pretty chunky downsides to this. And also, you have to kill someone while the APS is active, and you don't really get that much. It doesn't happen that often, so I don't know if it's really that worth it at the end of the day. I just prefer running this over it. For the second module slot, so for the canister module, there's the early upgrades, which I'm not a huge fan of, don't really care too much about them. And these are all statistics that impact the actual canister and not the actual performance of the gun. And then after that, so these last 3 ones are kind of the ones that I would look at. I don't hate this one because it gives you 3 canister volley charges, which I feel is very beneficial for the actual vehicle. I feel like this is actually something that should be considered on the base vehicle, and it would make the canisters actually feel a little bit more effective than they are. When running this, each pellet, it applies 50 slow, so you can actually slow people down quite consistently while running this, especially with the fact that you have 3 charges. I would say this is probably one of the better or even best options, but there's also the one that increases the 30% ramming damage for 5 seconds when you activate it, so you do more ramming damage while it's active. I don't really care too much about it. What I actually care about more is the canister volley switching time, which is an instant swap. It also decreases the aiming speed during it, but increases the canister volley cooldown by itself. I actually prefer running this personally, just because I like having that instant canister swap, but I will say, utility-wise, this is probably the better option. And then there's also the option of the legendary, which when you kill an enemy with the ability, it resets the cooldown, allows you to cast it again for free. This decreases the dispersion on it, but also increases the maximum penetration. I think this is quite useful because it breaks the threshold for a lot of sides of vehicles. So it allows you to penetrate like the side of an FV, or it allows you to penetrate the side of a Leo more easily or more efficiently, like the Leo 2KST and stuff like that, or even the sides of like the XM190 and stuff like that as well. I like the extra penetration, but I wouldn't say you're always going to be using this for killing shots. So sometimes you will get the benefit of using this, and sometimes you won't. But I feel like this penetration is kind of making up for it, and you will see this as the one that I use in the game that I actually play for the upgraded vehicle. But generally, I would recommend any of these 3, just depending on your actual playstyle. If you prefer having the 3 canister shots, I think this is probably the best option, especially with the utility addition of slowing people. So if you get people's rear, you can slow them quite easily, and because you can slow them, they can't as easily turn to face you and fight you off as it with the other canister rounds. So it is a very good option. If you want that instant canister, so you shoot canister instantly so that you can get like super high output of damage in very quick time, this one's perfect. And if you want the higher penetration and ability for technically infinite canister volley rounds, I'm not going to say that it's actually infinite because you have to kill every target with that, but I have procced it like 2 or 3 times in a row. But this is generally what I personally run. For the firepower mod slot, I don't really care about these first 2 ones. The third one isn't that bad of an option for the 3.66 second reload. This decreases your reload time when boosting to about 2.9 seconds. It increases the velocity of the APHE, which doesn't really matter all that much in my opinion, but the reload time is nice to have. Not a huge fan of the ramming damage multiplier, don't really care for it. I don't think you should waste your tech on this. For the CPD 378, so the rare slot, critting an enemy's internal module grants Celius for 10 seconds, so this allows you to have minus 25% reload. It does increase your base reload up to 4.21 seconds, but it also increases the AP penetration and AP damage maximum. So with this Celius, when you hit like ammo racks or fuel tanks, you can get like a 3.6 second reload time, and then when boosting, it's pretty similar to the same performance as this. I prefer running this. This is actually the one that I use, but another option is hitting an enemy's vehicle internal module applies fragile, also decreases your reload time. So if you want to save up your tech, I would recommend maybe going for this over this option. It decreases the stationary and moving reticle, but one downside, and the only reason why you might want to stay with this over this, is just the reduction in the APHE damage. It does apply fragility when you hit internal modules, which essentially means that if you hit someone like 2 or 3 times in an internal module, it's going to be much easier to penetrate their side or rear with a canister shot than if you didn't. Personally, I still just prefer this, but again, if you're not hitting internal modules super often, you could either go this option or this option. For the mobility slot, the forward speed, not a huge fan of how much it gives. I feel like it could give a little bit more. Engine power, also not a huge fan of it. Burnout, after a hit to the engine, you deploy smoke. So this is if you get hit in the engine. It does increase your forward speed to a more comfortable forward speed, but it does decrease your armor in general. I don't really know if it's worth the trade-off, because this gives you the threshold of being penetrated by a lot of high explosive rounds. So not a huge fan of the negatives on this. I feel like I don't think it should touch the whole armor at all, in all honesty. But at least it doesn't reduce the already low hit points on this vehicle. So I guess at the end of the day, it's not that bad of a trade-off. I just don't prefer having too much smoke on this vehicle, because this vehicle doesn't have the option to get thermals, but it has a lot of options for smoke, which I find kind of weird. Like, I feel like it should have just base thermals or something if that was the case. Give it something to make it feel a little bit more competitive with its smoke. But this increase in forward speed does make it feel a lot better when it comes to actual speed. It's not what I use. I use on a kill, I get overdrive. So this essentially just means that I'm very much easier to reach my top speed, and I kind of can boost around for a lot longer with the ability of having overdrive. Personally, this one is reliant on getting kills and is maybe a bit too situational for most people. And for most people, I think I would just recommend having this module over the actual overdrive. But this is what I run personally. For the 5th module slot, I take max energy, but honestly, either of these doesn't really matter. I don't think this vehicle really has an energy issue, in my opinion. So either of these are just kind of what you prefer. If you're not getting kills and stuff as frequently as I do, maybe just the energy regeneration rate, but I just go max energy. For the 6th module slot, I personally go vehicle camouflage, just because it's harder for people to notice me on the flanks if I just have that slight higher increase in camouflage and am not getting pinged my location. For equipment that I run, I personally, since this is a very low health vehicle, I run the 550 hit points for when you instantly proc it. This just kind of gives me a bit more survivability and ability to fight higher and healthier vehicles. Again, not a huge fan of the rebuild kit on low health vehicles, just because I don't think it's as efficient. And technically you could use recovery system, because you can run away and just sit in the back and wait to heal up, but I feel like the recovery system just takes too long and takes you out of the fight for too long. For the 2nd equipment slot, I run just recovery protocol. Don't really think TEPS is worthwhile for this vehicle. And exhaust fail, not a huge fan of adding smoke on a vehicle that doesn't have the ability to utilize smoke efficiently without the option for thermals. If this vehicle had thermals, I would say the exhaust fail is a perfectly fine option to take. Then you would have 3 smoke options, but otherwise, not a huge fan of it. Let's go over actual agent skills for this vehicle. So skills wise, in the first slot, I generally take the plus 100% to track HP. This just prevents me from getting tracked as often and being able to keep up my speed. It also means if I use my handbrake when I'm slowed, I get a 50% slow resistance, or when someone's trying to slow me, it just makes it a little bit easier to prevent getting slowed. For the second one, I actually use the minus 5% to main gun cooldown. This just makes it a lot easier to kind of deal damage to people. Third one is plus 5 ultimate energy per second while boosting. I think this is probably the one you want in your first slot because it just helps you get the ultimate up so quickly. The release a smoke cloud with a 10-meter radius around the vehicle when you drop to low health. Again, the vehicle doesn't utilize smoke that efficiently, so I feel like this can just do more harm to you than good. So I don't really recommend it just because it doesn't have thermals. However, for the HSTVL, I think this is a perfectly fine option. For the fourth option, this is kind of an either or, the 25% damage dealt by the explosion, or 20% radius for the EMP, and minus 50 explosion damage it deals to your own vehicle. I like this option for suicide bombing people. So if you know there's a group of 5 people, you ult yourself and then you run straight into those 5 people. This kind of helps you get out of that situation with a little bit more health so that you could potentially survive. And this one just increases the damage, which puts it about 1300. So that's just kind of everything for the overview of the vehicle that I wanted to talk about. Let's go ahead and hop into some games. I do just want to mention, if you do like the videos and are wanting to see more in the future, it'd be nice if you leave a like and a subscribe. It always helps. But let's go ahead and hop into the stock gameplay. So with this vehicle, I'm not a huge fan of it, just in general. Like, I won't lie. I will say there are some, like, satisfying things about the vehicle. Like, APHE itself is pretty satisfying, just due to the fact that it makes hitting some ammo racks easier, but on the flip side, it also makes hitting some other ammo racks a little bit more difficult. I will say APHE is pretty useful when hitting the ammo rack on, like, the Martyr and stuff, but one thing that should be mentioned is, like, when you're trying to ammo rack a Leo frontally, you have to make sure you aim for the lower front plate, and you can't just ammo rack it through the front plate, stuff like that. Like, I don't know, it's not bad, right? But in 9 times out of 10 situations, I should have technically just died every single time there, just because there's 3 people, but none of them really looked at me, so I was able to kind of kill that Martyr by myself. But I don't know. Like, one thing that you'll know with this vehicle, when you play it enough, is Martyr mines are pretty damn devastating against you. It's one of the reasons why I'm destroying every single Martyr mine I get the option to. Just simply put, the Martyr mines can one-shot this vehicle from full health, right? And that's just because of the amount of ammo racks that are available frontally on this vehicle. It's just more consistent for the mines to actually be able to do that damage to this vehicle than to a lot of other vehicles, just due to the placement of the ammo racks. I think that's like one of my biggest gripes with this vehicle, is similar like to the Leo. Because of the frontal ammo racks, it's super squishy frontally. I don't know if it's as bad as the Leo, just because at least it has a little bit more health. But one thing that should be noted with the side of this vehicle is that, like, high explosive can penetrate the sides of this vehicle quite consistently. And even frontally, it can penetrate this vehicle. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. And another thing that I particularly do not like about the stock vehicle is just the damage, right? I feel like I'm hitting ammo racks and stuff, and I'm just only doing like 600 damage. And that's not that much higher than the actual, like, stock damage of the vehicle, which is about 400. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it's not bad because it is on a 4-second reload. I just don't like it because it's not that satisfying. right? I guess there's the satisfying nature that I'm kind of looking for in this vehicle, and that's one of the things is like this vehicle wasn't given the big 152mm gun. I wish there was like an option to attach it to the vehicle, but I don't really see that being an option in the future. Now, one of the best matchups for this vehicle is simply just like the Leo. Being able to fight the Leo is probably one of the very easiest things this vehicle can do. And that's just because every vehicle can kind of just stomp on the Leo, to be honest. It's not anything in particular to just the Leo, or to this vehicle, I should say. But at least it does have that matchup where it almost is pretty consistent in always winning. And there's also some vehicles where it has an easier time with like the Canister per se, like the T62A. The whole side of the T62A is very easy to penetrate with the Canister. The whole side of the XM190 is pretty easy to penetrate with the Canister. But then you also have vehicles like the M60A1, where this vehicle actually kind of struggles against, because in all honesty, the M60 hole is kind of really wonky, so you can't really penetrate it from the side. Same kind of with the ALVT. The ALVT has enough side armor that you can't really pen it from the side and stuff like that. You gotta treat it more like a defender and go straight for the rear. I think that's one of the like biggest downsides for like the Canister rounds for me is the penetration. Because you would think that you could pen the side of like a Leo 2KST, but you can't. I mean, you can, kind of, but it's mostly orange or red, which makes it really hard to actually pen the side of it. And that's just some things that I've noticed about this vehicle. Even, like, the sides of the Leo, like, I gotta make sure that I get a flat side of the Leo in order to penetrate it properly. Now, it does seem like this guy gave up. He just had enough of me. If I just aimed for the fuel tank, I would have killed him in the first shot, but I was trying to go for the ammo shot in the turret. And, I don't know. Like, don't get me wrong, the vehicle isn't unplayable, right? But I'm not a huge fan. I feel at times that this vehicle feels a lot more sluggish than I'm hoping for. I don't know, maybe I'm just expecting too much from the vehicle. I'm expecting it to be so fast just because it doesn't have any armor, but I don't think that's kind of the intention of the vehicle. I think it's just kind of to be annoying little pesky mosquito, and that's about it. One thing you'll notice with this vehicle is when someone decides to focus you, most times you'll lose. Right, like this T62A. The moment he decided to focus me, it was kind of already GG for me. It also sucks that I do kind of get away, but die to the martyr ult. I don't know. It's like, it was so, I guess I should speak to some like plus sides, is like with APHE at least on this vehicle, is you can kind of perform decently at range just due to the fact that, you know, you don't have your post penetration damage fall off or anything like that. And you still retain a decent amount of penetration at range. And that's kind of one thing that is nice about the vehicle, is you can kind of play it as this medium to long range flanker in scenarios where you kind of need it to, because you're doing the same amount of damage close range as you're doing far range, essentially. The only difference is if you can hit those ammo racks and stuff at far range, or compared to like close range and stuff. But one thing, like, it's just, I don't know, the DPM of this vehicle, like, I just put 2 shots into that FB, and it doesn't feel that rewarding, right? I have to sink so many shells into this guy just before he's actually close to death, and I'm not even the only one putting shots into him, right? It's, I don't know. It's a similar thing to like the M60A1. Like the M60A1 has really good like reload times and stuff like that, but the damage just isn't all there. I feel like just, I don't know, just a little bit more post pen crit damage or something would make this vehicle feel a little bit nicer. Like, sometimes I would like to hit 750, 800 damage crits in this vehicle, but that's not really an option for, like, the shell type that the vehicle runs or anything like that. One thing that I kind of am not a huge fan about this vehicle as well is just the way the ult kind of squishes the camera into the vehicle. And I think it happens similarly to the HSTVL and stuff like that. But I don't know, for some reason it's also just like a thing where it just feels slower. And I think the ult, the only reason why it squishes it for me is possibly due to the fact that the FOV goes back to normal when you're quote-unquote ulting. So my FOV is kind of maxed out, but when I ult, I think it resets my FOV back to normal. And that might be one of the reasons why. I think I'll have to do some more testing for that. But you can't really change it for just this vehicle, because if you change it for just this vehicle, then when you use ultimates on like other vehicles, it makes it really hard to actually hit them with, you know, increased FOV, because they were designed to be used at a certain FOV regardless. This is kind of like that long to medium range flanker, like kind of just where this vehicle, I would say, kind of excels. You're far enough away that people aren't really going to shoot you, but you're close enough that you could kind of just deal with them if they come too close. I don't know, it's a good middle ground for this vehicle, but again, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm biased against this vehicle that I don't have the greatest time. I feel like I have to put in so much effort in this vehicle just to get the same exact results as if I were playing any other vehicle in this game. Like, I have to spend so much uptime shooting people in a match in order to like place first, right? Like, and that's the thing with this vehicle, is you're not really, there's no huge benefit to going towards caps and stuff in this vehicle, because you kind of get shit on. You either go to caps and, you know, deal damage and die and don't get the cap, or you go to cap, don't deal any damage, so now you're reducing your output by a huge margin, and you don't really get enough from a capture to make up for it. In this vehicle particularly. In other vehicles, I would say it's perfectly fine. It's a nice middle ground. Now, one thing I will say is the best mode for this vehicle, and unironically, maybe even the HSTVL, is just kill confirmed when it comes to like getting score and stuff. There's just something about this game mode and light vehicles. I think it's this ultimate and the ability for them to just constantly get it in this game mode. Yeah, that was a pretty goofy suicidal, but I didn't really see any other option. Plus, I'm not too worried. It's like, it's the first death. I'm not super worried about it. And, you know, it did score me about 5,000 damage. I did deal quite a considerable amount of damage to the enemy team there. Like, I hit 4 people, which is not a bad thing to do with an ultimate. Sometimes it's not the worst outcome. I don't know. One thing that I will say is, if you can get like the sides and rears, or if you can kind of play around enemy defenders, is kind of the best option for this vehicle. Like, you can run circles around the M1E1. I mean, it's not so much the FV because of the faster traverse of the FV, but you can kind of just circle an M1E1 and slowly pick it apart. But I'm not going to say that that's something you can always do, especially if their teammates are assisting them, or yeah, just if their team even looks at them, or if they play smart and like back themselves into a wall or anything like that. Now, one thing I do wish like the Canister had on this vehicle is just an ability to cancel it so that you can go back to your normal shell. And the only reason why I say that is sometimes you'll like pull out your canister, you're going to shoot, and then you don't really find the opportunity to actually shoot. And in those situations, it would have just been better to have swapped back to your normal ammo than to holding on to the canister and trying to quote-unquote wait for the perfect shot. Now, one thing that I do like about like fighting ALVTs in this vehicle is you can actually preemptively ignite their oil and kind of prevent them from setting your team on fire, because you technically are the one that set it on fire, which means it doesn't damage your team or anything. It will still damage you, but it won't give like the ALVT or anything the points. Also, yeah, there's an example of the canister wasn't able to do anything to the ALVT. Like, there's no shot in hell that I was going to pin aside the ALVT with the canister there. In all honesty, it would have been a better option just to stick with the APHE instead of trying to swap for the canister. There's an example of if you don't hit the lower front plate, and you don't hit it correctly, you're just not going to ammo rack, you know, the Leo, and that's just kind of the nature of APHE in general. And I don't think that's entirely a bad thing, right? Like, if APHE, you know, penetrated it all the time, like, the Leo would suffer even more. Regardless, luckily for me, that M1E1 is paying absolutely no attention, and I'm able to kind of just absolutely mog this Leo 2KST. I'm not sure what exactly happened there with his EMP pack. I think it, like, hit a weird part of my vehicle, so it didn't do damage to me. I don't know. This vehicle can be fun in some situations. Like, sometimes just running around an enemy is fun and all, right? But I don't know if it's every game that you can have those opportunities. I think it's like every 1 in 3 games, I felt like, wow, this vehicle is kind of just fun to play. But those 2 out of 3 games, instead, I felt like I was just getting farmed instead. And that's kind of an aspect of this vehicle, is like, it all depends on what the enemy goes. Like, I've noticed if the enemies are playing M60A1s, surprisingly, that vehicle does really well against the M55A1. And the fact that you don't face any M55A1s ever because no one ever plays the vehicle is also kind of one of the points of why this vehicle doesn't feel as good either, because it's not really like facing itself. It doesn't have that squishy target for it to kind of pick on most of the time, right? Because of the fact that it could be matched against flankers or I guess attackers of all kind, means that, you know, you can face not Leos, my bad. You can face T62s, you can face Object 287s, you can face M60A1s, M60A2s, ALVTs, XM190s. You're pretty good against XM190s, I won't lie, though, for the most part. Though, I think a lot of vehicles are pretty good against the XM190. But, like, one of the things I noticed is, like, vehicles like the Object 287 are most of the time just going to stomp this vehicle, because it's going to grapple itself into you, slam you for a bunch of damage, and then finish you off with its magazine. And I don't know if that's really a bad thing. It is kind of like a cat and mouse scenario, but I don't know if this vehicle should be facing those in every scenario, right? Especially in like 5v5s and stuff, where the ALVT is just a really good all-rounder, while this vehicle isn't. It simply just isn't. It's a fast vehicle that has low, you know, reload, but also not the greatest damage. But the ALVT, in all consideration, has low reload, high damage, and decent armor, but it's not as fast. And I don't know, the gameplay of this game doesn't really suit the M551A1 as much as it does the ALVT. And I think that's just a factor of, in all regards, the M55A1 or 1A1, unless you're running the specific upgrade, most of the time is only ever going to realistically be 10 to 15 kilometers faster than an ALVT. Now, albeit it has a lot better acceleration and everything in that regards, but top speed wise, not really. Like, I've noticed sometimes I get chased by ALVTs or XM190s or M60A1s. It's not impossible for those vehicles to, like, catch me, right, and chase me down. And I think that's just something about this vehicle that, or just in general, that kind of is a bit disappointing. I kind of wish this vehicle felt as fast as, like, the Leo 2KST with the masked upgrade that allows it to zoom at like 80 kilometers an hour without any boosting at all. Things like that would be nice to have on this vehicle. And another thing with this vehicle is I don't get why they put so much smoke on the vehicle, right? There's so many options for smoke. There's 4 options, right? You could use it in your equipment. You could get it with your APS. You could get it with your movement speed. You can get it inside of your actual agent abilities if you drop below 25% hit points, right? There's so much smoke, but this vehicle doesn't have a single option for thermals in its state, right? It would be... I don't think it would be a bad option if this vehicle had thermals from the get-go. Just a base thing the vehicle gets. But that's also kind of just my opinion, right? Like, and even if you think about it, like, things like the ALVT, they have an upgrade for thermals, but this vehicle doesn't have a single upgrade that allows you to get thermals, right? I don't know. And I mean, I do complain about this vehicle a lot. And I think it all just boils down to, in order to have an equal performing game as almost any other vehicle, you have to perform a lot better. You have to essentially expend more energy from yourself to have just the same output of game as like an ALVT or, you know, a T62 and any of those vehicles, right? Hell, I think even the Leo has an easier time getting score than the M55, just because if you really want score in the M55, you can sit 1,000 miles away and get a bunch of score from range damage, right? Now, I mean, I don't know. I don't hate this vehicle as much as I feel like I should, but that's just because you kind of just run around like a headless chicken and kind of hope, right? You just kind of, you don't really play this thing with a game plan, right? But it is something that you have to remember. Stock FVs and stock M60A2s are going to see you as an easy meal. They can penetrate you frontally. They can even aim rack you frontally, depending on how they aim, if they aim right. It's just one thing that you kind of just got to keep aware in this vehicle, that it's generally just not that strong. And I don't know if that's really a bad thing, but anyways, thank you again for watching. If you did enjoy the video, I hope you have a good one. Goodbye.